Okay, so I just want to take a moment to thank everyone here who spoke and thank everyone who listened. This was incredibly thoughtful and informative and very respectful, and we really appreciate that. And with that, I'm now going to turn to the next portion of our agenda, which is a presentation from the department talking about the actions that we've been undertaking relative to PFAS and actions that are still ongoing. And so to begin the presentation, I mentioned it's going to be in three parts by our Assistant Commissioner for Water Resources, Doug Fine, our Director of Office of Research and Standards, Mark Smith, and our Assistant Commissioner for Waste Site Cleanup, Paul Walk. So I'd like to introduce Mark Smith.
So hi everybody. I'm going to just basically review some information that's already been noted today. I'm sure most of you are already well aware of this. But back in June of last year, the department established a drinking water guideline, ORSG, derived by my group here at MassDEP, the Office of Research and Standards, at 70 parts per trillion for a combination of 5 of the longer chain perfluorinated compounds. So this is a step in the direction of trying to look at these as groups as opposed to individual compounds. The decision to do that was primarily based on the considerable structural similarity between these longer chain compounds, as well as similarities in the toxicology databases that are available, and for some it's more than others, and the identified long serum half-lives these compounds exhibit if they're ingested and taken into the body. This particular guideline was reviewed extensively by our Health Defense Advisory Committee, who concurred at the time that it was a reasonable approach to move forward. I would note at this point that we are perfectly aware of all of the new state limits and guidelines that have been developed and proposed over the last year or so, as well as some additional information that's come out since we issued our ORSG, in particular the ATSDR MRL documents that came out shortly after we issued our ORSG. I think it's on. I'll hold it up a little closer. Is that better? Yeah, okay. So we are reviewing the additional information from the ATSDR toxicity profiles, a recent report by the European Food Safety Authority, which was published in December, where they actually looked at human epidemiological data to derive equivalent values to RFDs that we're using, as well as to proposals that just came out last month by New York and New Hampshire for drinking water standards, MCL proposals by both of those groups. We're also working with the drinking water program and the waste site cleanup program to implement the current ORSG that's been ongoing since last year, and also to develop some draft standards for use under the waste site cleanup program. Paul will be mentioning those shortly. All right, so here's a summary of where various states and organizations fall right now with respect to guidelines and standards for PFAS compounds in drinking water. So we all are aware of the U.S. EPA Health Advisory, which is 70 parts per trillion for PFAS and PFOA. A number of states have been developing their own guidelines, which are somewhat different from what EPA derived for PFAS and PFOA. The ATSDR draft document, again, this is a draft document. They did not derive drinking water guidelines in their document, but if you use the same protocol that EPA used for deriving health advisories for PFAS and PFOA, the numbers that are listed in the table of results, so substantially lower values for PFAS, PFOA, and additional values for PFNA and the hexasulfonate. New York just recently proposed values of 10 parts per trillion, but only for PFAS and PFOA. And at this point, they're treating them individually, although that is still under consideration by their Department of Public Health. These are proposed values that have to go through their state MCL derivation and establishment process, so these are not yet formal MCLs. New Jersey has values also for PFAS and PFOA that have been proposed but not yet adopted. They do have an MCL for PFNA at 13 parts per trillion. Again, they're treating these individually, they're not summing them. California adopted the New Jersey values basically as interim notification levels, and they are working to develop their own state values. I really don't know where they stand in that process right now. Vermont has adopted groundwater standards of 20 parts per trillion for the sum of the same five that we're considering here in Massachusetts under the ORSG. Connecticut has drinking water action levels exactly the same as we have right now, 70 parts per trillion for the 5 compounds, and they too are looking very closely at what other states are doing and other agencies. And Minnesota has, through a different process, established values of 27 parts per trillion for PFAS, which they are reviewing, and I have been told that will likely go down to some degree, to a lower number, 35 for PFOA, and they are recommending the use of the PFAS number for the hexasulfonate, so right now it's at 27. That could go down. They have initiated efforts to develop a separate standard or guideline for the hexasulfonate, which I believe they are working on right now. So the last column really addresses other PFAS compounds, so PFBS and Gen X, which are shorter chain compounds. Minnesota right now has a value of 2,000 parts per trillion. It's a guidance value. If you use the draft EPA RFD, which they just issued and it's out for public comment, the equivalent value would be greater than 30,000 parts per trillion. So, indicating a much higher level that EPA might ultimately view as being acceptable for a drinking water exposure pathway. For Gen X, the only available number we've found was 140 parts per trillion, which is a North Carolina-derived value. So they have some significant contamination around a couple of sites there. Based on the EPA draft RFD, that value would be about 200 parts per trillion. So we're reviewing all of this information and taking into consideration for the proposed values that we would adopt for standards in the NCP for groundwater and for soils, and also revisions to drinking water guideline values. All right, so Doug's going to follow up with an update on the drinking water program efforts.
Thank you, Mark. So I'm Douglas Fine. I'm the Assistant Commissioner for the How's that?
Just put it as close to the knot in your side as possible.
I'll just hold it.
Okay.
So I'm the Assistant Commissioner for the water programs here at MassDEP, and that includes our drinking water program as well as other water-related programs. So this is, again, just a little bit of a deeper dive on some of the DEP activities that Stephanie Cooper mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, and just fleshing them out a little further, but it'll be a brief conversation. I only have a couple of slides. So far there have been 5 public water systems that have been identified that have PFAS that exceed the 2018 guideline that Mark Smith just talked about. And DEP proactively worked with each of all these public water systems to help ensure that they did not deliver water exceeding the guideline to their customers. And that has included both working with them on identifying short-term options, whether it was blending of their water sources, or turning off certain wells and relying on other wells, temporary treatment in some cases, and then also moving forward with longer-term options with installing treatment to ensure that they get below what's currently our guideline. We also work closely with these public water suppliers to ensure that they have robust and very timely communications with their customers, so that the public knows very quickly what's the status of the presence of these chemicals in their water and the actions that the public water system has taken. In the case of Devens, Ayer, and Westfield, those were water systems that were below the federal health advisory, but it turned out to be above our state guideline. So we worked with them proactively. Once we knew we were very strongly considering a guideline that was more stringent than the federal guideline, we worked with them to make sure they knew that this was in strong consideration. It was very likely coming, so that they could start taking proactive steps to look at options to get below a guideline when and if it came out lower, and in fact it did, as Mark has already described. For other PWS with detections that are below the Officer Research and Standard Guidelines, we're continuing to monitor those very closely. I will say that we are exploring conducting additional sampling at targeted public water supplies that are in areas where there's known contamination of the groundwater, or near areas where there's already been identified contamination of drinking water. We are also exploring how we can reach out to a broader group of public water suppliers. I think Laurel had mentioned the public water suppliers that tested under UCMR 3. Depending on which lab they use, they may have more data beyond what was required to be reported under the federal guidelines. So we're exploring ways to reach out to them to get that data and have that made publicly available. For these public water supplies that have been impacted so far, the source of the contamination has been the firefighting foam, with 2 exceptions. In one case, it's likely traced to a manufacturing facility, and in one other case, we're still investigating what is the source of that contamination. DEP has posted on our website, has posted on our website a map showing all the detections of public water supplies of PFAS thus far. We'll continue to update that on a regular basis, and also via our website and our PFAS landing page, you can get to the specific values that have been reported through the drinking water program for the PFAS that have been tested for. A few other activities that I'll mention in the Bureau of Water. So continuing on for public water systems, now anytime there's a new water supply is adding a new source, a new well or what have you, to its public water system, there's a variety of rigorous tests that need to happen to ensure that that water is safe to go online. We have added PFAS testing now to any new source approval process, and that is in place going forward. Bottled water was mentioned earlier as a possible alternative, or an alternative that some people we know take advantage of. So given the lack of PFAS testing of bottled water, we have collaborated with the Massachusetts Department of Public Health that actually regulates the commerce of bottled water in the Commonwealth. We reached out to all the bottled water suppliers that deliver water to Massachusetts, sell water in Massachusetts, to ask them if they have done any testing and to provide those results to us. As they provide those results, we post them on our website, so that is currently live. You can also find that through our PFAS landing page. So far, only a couple of the water bottlers have provided that information, but we're hoping that that continues to grow and we'll continue to make that information available. Lastly, I'll mention PFAS testing for residuals and land application of residuals. So these are solids from wastewater processing, also drinking water processing, sludges, but also paper manufacturing and also food waste. And residuals are allowed to be used for certain beneficial uses, land applied to the ground, whether it's for fertilizer or livestock bedding and other uses. And testing is required for a variety of contaminants as part of those routine reviews and approvals of that land application of these materials. We are now adding PFAS. We have just added PFAS as one of our constituents that we do require sampling for, and that will be the case going forward for all approvals of residuals to be land applied. So that includes not only new applications, but these applications for the proposals to apply land applied residuals need to be renewed every 5 years, and we'll be including this requirement as part of our renewals as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Paul Locke. in our Bureau of Waste Site Cleanup.
How's the sound for this? Right? A little closer? All right, we'll do this. So I'm Paul Locke, the Assistant Commissioner for the Bureau of Waste Site Cleanup, and this has been and will continue to be a very coordinated effort among pretty much all the programs within MassDEP and all the regional offices. As you see from the participation here from the department. So under the Waste Site Cleanup program, our activities have primarily taken off from the point where water supplies have been identified as containing PFAS, and our role is to then look at and identify potential sources and work backwards and try to begin the source identification and the cleanup process under the Massachusetts Contingency Plan, which is our waste site cleanup regulations. Overall, in this world of emerging contaminants, I think we're all trying to normalize the process and bring them into the existing systems, the existing standards and regulations that are applied. So we're working on source discovery, identifying where it might be coming from, sending out requests for information to find out who has been using these materials in the past, who may be using them now, what were their waste management practices, and where it's applicable, we'll send out notices of responsibility and bring them into the waste site cleanup program, issue a release tracking number, and begin the site assessment and cleanup process. As part of that, depending upon who the responsible party is that has been identified and their ability to conduct the work, whether it's willingness or financial ability, or in the case of the Department of Defense, sometimes it's programmatic ability, DEP will step forward and do some of the analysis, some of the sampling where it's necessary, and particularly where we've identified potential sources, such as in Westfield, and the responsible party is not willing or able to conduct sampling of private wells in the area, DEP will make sure that that happens. And we use our state resources to do that in the absence of a responsible party that's willing and able to do that. So that's part of our work as well. Honestly, we prefer the situation where there is a responsible party willing and able to do that work. And there are situations, we have sites where that is going on as well. We're working with EPA and the Department of Defense. It's a fairly complex regulatory and policy situation, but we're working with them as well. And I forgot I had animation in this. We'll work with the public water, identify public water supplies that are contaminated, and then DEP will work outwards, not only looking at the public water supply wells, but the private wells that might be in the area as well. And go outwards. Other things we have done in kind of the attempt or the process of normalizing the situation, normalizing the assessment of PFAS contamination. First, we want the licensed site professionals who oversee the site assessment and cleanup work in Massachusetts to have this on their radar. The first step in that was issuing guidance last June on how and when and where to sample, look for PFAS contamination, and LSPs have been doing that. One of the more recent sites in Martha's Vineyard was identified as a result of this process, as well in LSP, realizing that work being done near an airport that had used AFFF in the past, that they should be looking for the PFAS in the groundwater, and unfortunately, or found it. I guess it's fortunate that they found it, because then you can work towards eliminating exposure. More importantly, in order to truly normalize this process, we want to bring it into the MCP regulations, have cleanup standards and guidelines for soil, or cleanup standards for soil and groundwater in the regulations, Method 1 standards, have a risk assessment process laid out that people can follow, and perhaps most importantly, have notification requirements. So when people identify levels that exceed the reportable concentrations, there's an obligation to notify DEP, bring them into the system, and start the assessment process. That's how it works for all other chemicals. We want to make sure the same process works for PFAS compounds as well. So we will be issuing draft regulations in the near future. Don't ask me the exact date, I don't know. but in the near future. And there will be a public comment process involved with that as well. So I hope and expect everybody here will be coming back and participating in that process as well. And we will have, to the extent that we can, coordinating with the drinking water program. So the approach that we use for what we call GW1 areas, groundwater that's being protected for its current use or potential future use as drinking water, we look at that the same way that the drinking water program looks at public well contamination. So in addition to all this work, people have referenced the program that we have done here at MassDEP, working with fire services to have dialogue with the firefighting community, identify old stocks of AFFF, and we've instituted a program where we will go around, our contractors will go pick it up, send it up for incineration at appropriately regulated facilities, so that we're removing that stock, removing potential use, and then inadvertent consequences down the road from the use of AFFF. As notes, we have 125,000 pounds of AFFF that we have taken out of circulation, and if there are other stockpiles that are left, we're certainly more than willing to continue that program. And then that's you.
Thank you. Okay, so now we are back to talk about the next steps on the petition and this process. We have already spoken about how we're welcoming written feedback. We do ask that you provide that to us by the end of the day tomorrow, and we're going to show you a resource for how you can do that. You can also, we're happy to take comments today. We've taken a number of written comments. We have been, and we will continue to consider the petition and all the available information feedback that we've received. Just to let you know, the presentations that you've seen today will all be on our website. We also intend to post all of the written comments that we received, so those resources will be available for people to review after today's meeting if they would like to. And as per our regulations, we will be issuing a response to the petition by Monday, January 28th to the petitioners, and we will post it on our website as well. We have some resources. We mentioned various elements that we've developed that are available on our website. I think I just said actually everything on this slide. But you can see, if you go to, you can Google, but you can also go to mass.gov/DEP, and on our home page at the bottom under top actions and activities, PFAS is the first one, and that will take you to all of the resources. We've listed here the contacts, the names of the individuals that you have heard from today, as well as US EPA's web resource on PFAS-related issues. And with that, I would really like to sincerely thank our petitioners for the information that they brought forth and for their presentations today. Heather Govern, Jen Duggan, and Shayna Casper, on behalf of Conservation Law Foundation and Toxics Action Center, respectively. I would also very much like to thank all of you for coming today, for patiently listening, and for your contributions. We really very much appreciate that. And I want to assure you that hopefully it's become evident in the course of this presentation that PFAS is an issue that is of vital importance right now, and that our department is spending a tremendous amount of time and resources, and I can commit to you that that will continue for the foreseeable future. So thank you for your time, and with that we will close today's meeting. Take care.